Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Brandon Bonner. My name is Craig Allison.
I was going to say, you have to redo that because you started, I was doing this, and I was like, you have to redo it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison.
My name is Brandon Bonner.
And we'll be your host. All right, like I said, welcome back. This episode is one that you and I have talked a little bit about, artificial intelligence, how it's changing the landscape of our world, what we should be concerned about. Should we be concerned about some of the stuff that's taking place right now? And I'm looking at this introduction here that I did a little bit of digging on, thinking about it in terms, if we went back like 10 years and we started talking about the stuff that right now is going on with artificial intelligence, we would probably think, no, man, that's like science fiction, and it's not. Mm-hmm. What we thought was science fiction, we're like living in the middle of it. So companies like Neuralink, if you know anything about Neuralink, they're developing brain-computer interfaces that are geared towards restoring things in your brain that have been basically lost, functions that have been lost. Really enhancing your brain power, becoming something more super brain power stuff. Increasing lifespan, which we're going to get into, like this transhumanism thing in next week's episode. Today we're going to focus on the current technology with artificial intelligence, though. And so I wanted to kick off the conversation, I think, from a foundational standpoint of what exactly does it mean to be human. And I know we've talked about like being created in the image of God. We've talked about that a lot, Imago Dei. But I want to restart that conversation to serve as a prelude into this discussion about artificial intelligence, because I think it's one that we need to really stop and think about. What actually does it mean to be a human being?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. It's interesting. This is the angle, because I'm just now reading this for the first time, kind of your thoughts. But I think that what makes us human is, for me, I think about like there's a spiritual component. Soul, we talked about soul and spirit maybe a little bit in the past couple of weeks, but artificial intelligence, especially as it continues to become more and more advanced, it can mimic human emotion. And there's already people out there that are like building relationships with artificial intelligence because it's able to reason and have emotion, and it's designed to affirm the user that's using it. So I mean, it's again, like we talked about in the past, it's something that you're going to want to use, because that's how they make money, right? If you didn't want to use it, there would be no reason to have AI. So, but I think there's a soul, spirit component that you cannot replicate in artificial intelligence.
And we're getting dangerously close to that, at least mimicking what that looks like. And it's not coming from the AI side, although there's talk and chatter about AI becoming like self-aware, that kind of stuff. And so what does that mean? How does that conversation look from what you mentioned, soul, spirit? If a machine is now self-aware, what does that actually mean from a standpoint of like transcendence? And probably a conversation for another day. But what I've noticed, and today is a good example. So I was using Claude. Is that it, or ChatGPT? I can't. One of the.
Hopefully Claude.
No, I think it was actually Chat GTP.
GPT.
GPT. Okay. So I was asking it a question about a health-related things, sinus stuff, and just trying to pinpoint, if I need to be like taking some like acid reflux medicine or whatever. And it walks me through a series of all of these questions, and I'm getting pulled in like I'm actually talking to a doctor, online or something. Mm-hmm. And it's saying things like, if I were your family member, or if I were your friend, or if I were a doctor, if I was your primary health care, I would be saying this, and what you've said makes me think of this, and just very ingratiating. And I forgot that I'm really having a dialogue with something that doesn't have any, consciousness, so to speak. And that's just weird. That's a scary thing to be thinking about. And I think it was a couple weeks ago I mentioned to you the book that I've got coming out in hopefully another week or so. I did some testing on the ability of AI to properly diagnose mental health stuff from a counseling perspective. And it's spot on. The only thing that right now it's lacking is developing what's called a therapeutic alliance, which in a counseling situation is probably one of the most important things you can do. But when you've got a machine that feels like a counselor, talks like a counselor, gives you all of the right stuff that a counselor would do, you're getting pulled deeper and deeper into this world that I think at this point does not have any real boundaries set up.
Yeah. Well, I think that we have to look at, in the church, artificial intelligence, AI, and I think what we're talking about primarily is generative AI. So ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, et cetera. Those types of solutions that have kind of taken the world by storm, if you will, over the past couple of years, and have really just have grown tremendously, become very powerful tools. There's some really good things that have come from some of these tools. I have some friends that have leveraged these solutions as kind of a study aid. It does really good in breaking scripture down. If you're like, hey, break this passage down and show me the Greek text and provide some of the color and context. It does a really good job of presenting that information, and some of the solutions are better than others, but also presenting sources and where they're getting it from, so you can kind of see. It can be a really useful tool for us, but also it can be a dangerous tool. So I think about this age of technology, things that we've talked about, many weeks ago, about how do we prepare our kids and families. This is now going to have to become a point of conversation and discussion for us, because it's like, hey, AI can give you bad advice because it's leveraging the information that it has. And where is it getting its information from? The internet.
Right.
And and I know, and everyone else knows that there's some really good stuff on the internet. There's some really bad stuff on the internet. So I think that it's going to become even more paramount as we go into this age. We can't run away from it. It's here. It's going to happen. It is going to, I think, revolutionize the way that we approach technology and how we search things and find information and gain information and knowledge. And I think that in a lot of cases that can be very beneficial. There's even spiritual stuff that it can be a benefit. But on the same token, AI can be used to do very, very bad things. There's been cases where AI has influenced people that were having suicidal thoughts because it's designed to affirm, and it's using information on the internet, and it tries to build a connection with you, and sometimes it is not using the best sources and not giving you the best information. So we got to kind of remind ourselves, our friends, family, that, hey, this is a good tool. I'm not against using it. I use it all the time, but we have to be aware and understand what is it doing.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about we're really on the cusp, and it's a novelty right now, and I think everybody is experimenting with it and just beginning to learn its capabilities. I think a lot of people don't even realize just how robust the capabilities already are. And you mentioned, this dimension that it can pull a person in who may be mentally unstable and seeking out some type of relationship. And so it can turn to an artificial intelligent program that a generative, that now they're putting their emotional investment in something that's not real. And there's real danger in that, because that's what the church is supposed to be for. That's what, community relationships in the church is supposed to be for. So that tells me that we need to be on guard and proactive in putting ourselves, the church, positioning ourselves to make sure that our community understands we're the proper outlet for that, not something that is a program. But because it's, we're getting back to, I think, one of Satan's tactics, which is to get us to misplace our trust in things that are not real. But he wants to make those things look as real as possible. And certainly AI is filling that niche very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we can't forget, like, again, this is pulling information that's available to it. So sources from the internet, it's taking content and using that to influence the creation of new content. I mean, so we've all used Google, and I think there probably is a general hesitancy. Like, you Google something, like, okay, I need to really look at this. Is this legitimate? With certain generations, but I don't think that carries across all current generations that might be leveraging this tool. But again, I don't think we should steer away from it as a church. Like, I think that's also dangerous, because I think the church has a tendency to say, okay, this has a lot of real dangers, so let's just completely avoid it and not be prepared when we have to face things like this. So I think, having the conversation is definitely important and paramount for us as we enter this new age of artificial intelligence. But I don't think it's like you're not going to hear me say, hey, I don't think we should use AI whatsoever, because I think there's some really good benefits. There could be some really, really good, even just from like a church standpoint, like logistics and making life easier, because we know a lot of the work that gets done, administrative work that gets done at a lot of churches may be a heavy burden on one person. Like, there's not a large staff probably supporting this, or maybe you're asking a single person to do multiple different facets of like website management or social media. Like, there's just all these administrative things, and AI could help out in a lot of
and I see, stepping in and doing the busy work that would take a person 6 hours to do, AI can do it now in 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I get that, but I'm wondering if we see that fruit that's hanging in front of us, if it's going to end up making us stupid. Where we don't want to do any of the work on our own, where the temptation is to just begin using AI more and more for the stuff that we really need to be spending the time and putting the brain energy in and doing the work ourselves. That's that risk. That's that temptation that I see, not just in the church setting. And I've read some forums with like ministers like myself debating on how much they are going to use AI to help them develop lessons and, Bible studies and that kind of stuff. And I'm already seeing it feels kind of like a defensive posture to me, like justification of why they're going to lean more and more heavily on it. And it's like, where does that line get crossed? Let's say I want to develop a sermon and I get AI to like do an outline for me. Okay, that's kind of innocuous, because it's just like a skeleton of it. And then I'm going to build out the rest of it. But then what happens when it gets a little bit more complex or involved or crunch time or something like that? I can very easily see more people, again, not just in the church and in ministry, but in all aspects of different jobs, relying more and more and more heavily on AI. And, your brain is a muscle, and if you don't flex it, it will turn to mush, basically.
I think what you're going to see is a couple different things. So first off, I don't think it's going to make us more stupid. If anything, I think it's maybe going to make us more intelligent, because we're going to have access to information much quicker. You think about like the internet and Google. I mean, we have entered an age where you can know a little bit about a lot of different things, and I think AI is just going to take that to the next level. You can ask it, hey, how do I build this table? Here's how you build it. Here's some dimensions, and here's the tools you need. And you can now build a table, which you may have no experience for. You have something that is generated step-by-step instructions. I think about like the calculator. The calculator come on and became a thing, and it probably didn't make us better at math, but it made us to be able to compute things a lot quicker and ultimately more efficient. And I don't think there's ever been super serious negative impacts from the calculator being created. However, I think the the bigger concern is you're going to have people now that you're going to go into a room of 4 or 5 folks, and let's say you're an electrical engineer, and you go in a room and you've studied electrical engineering, you know electrical theory, and you know everything there is to know about electrical engineering, and now the 4 other people in that room might be able to use AI to get that same information much quicker, but they're not going to have the depth of knowledge. So I think you're going to have a lot of people that think they know a lot, but maybe don't actually know a lot, because AI will only go as deep as you push it to go. And I think that's probably the bigger danger. I don't think it's going to make us less intelligent. I think it's just going to make our intelligence not very deep, and we're going to think we know more than we do. And there's a lot of dangers in that, right? Being ignorant to what you don't know. So I think that's one risk. And I think the second, maybe the biggest risk, I do think it's going to impact our creativity. I think that's probably the biggest concern. It's great at probably putting a sermon outline together. And has probably saved many people many hours, and has not been a bad thing for ministers, or maybe it's helped you, I don't know, write some emails at work or however you use it. But I do think there's a risk for it making you less creative.
Yeah, and maybe that's more along the lines of where I'm thinking, because when I say that, like, there's certain parts of your brain that don't get engaged when you use AI, especially when you're trying to think of a creative way to say something. And if AI is going to do that all for you, and you never access that part of your brain, you literally reach a point where you can't access that part of your brain, because basically it's just stopped working anymore. And so going back to my original question, what does it mean to be human? It's wrapped up in that. That ability for creative process. And so I truly worry about the generations that are going to be coming up that may have a world that they live in where all of this access to having something do all the things for you is just normalized. And so there is no pushback, there's no challenge on it. It's like, why wouldn't you use that? And so from an intelligence standpoint, that creativity is part of intelligence. There's nothing intelligent about typing in a question and pushing enter and letting AI spit out all this, intelligent sounding stuff that you didn't think of or you didn't come up with. So I'm worried about that piece of it. I really am. And I don't know, I don't know if we have the safeguards in place to pull back from that.
Yeah, I think it's gonna. There's a lot of risk for that, right? I think that's something that 20 years from now, when we're looking back and doing studies on the impact of AI on the next generation, my generation, and the generation that's coming after me, what does that look like? I mean, maybe there's a big risk that we're no longer creative, and all our creativity comes from a machine. So I definitely think there's a risk there, but I think it's important for us as Christians thinking about AI and the impact on the church. I think there's good uses for it. However, I think this is no different than the internet or the news, right? Like Paul tells Timothy to test everything, right? Is that Timothy?
Yeah.
1 Timothy. Test everything, and this is no different. So you're leveraging AI, or maybe your kids are leveraging. I'm almost certainly that your kids have been exposed to AI at this point.
Hang on a second. I want to push back on you a little bit, because I think it is. I think AI is different than the internet. Like I think it's not just necessarily a search engine,
right?
It is, because you tapped into it too. I mean, we hit this emotional piece of it now, where it seems to be a real person that you're dealing with. And yes, it's accessing the internet and pulling, millions of things together so it can spit out a message, but it's getting better and better at capturing what it means to come across with human emotion. A Google search doesn't do that.
Right.
It doesn't tap into that emotional, spiritual piece that people are hungry for. And so, when we talk about people that are suffering from mental illness, that are lonely, that are looking for companionship, that they're filling the void with AI, and that's super dangerous. And you can't do that with Google. So I think it is different. I think we're treading in different territory than we've ever tread before.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that the information that comes to AI comes from the internet.
Well, we haven't talked about recursive AI. self-learning, which is on the horizon as well. And then, your top 5 guys, I'm not going to get into it. You and I have talked a little bit about this, but this next level of super intelligent AI, that's a whole nother thing. And I think that it has big spiritual implications for us if we're not very careful with that. And to your point, I say if we're not very careful with it, like we're going to have control over it. I think it's out of the box, and I don't think we're going to stop it.
No.
So I'm wondering if there needs to be more conversations like you and I are having about this within the churches.
Well, that is my concern, because my generation, and I think some people from your generation, are using artificial intelligence, but I think there's also a lot of people that are just completely avoiding it. I don't know about that. I'm not going to learn about it. And there's a lot of danger in that, I think, because you're right. We are going to have to prepare ourselves. The church is going to have to grow and prepare itself for this new problem that we're going to enter, where AI is able to kind of replace a minister, a counselor, a community, because I can develop and build a relationship with something that's going to tell me everything I want to hear, because that's what it's designed for.
Well, and not only that, but you also have a changing in, when I was in school, plagiarism was a big deal.
Right.
I mean, it was a code of conduct. It was a moral issue, and now I don't know what's going to happen from a cultural acceptance of that. But if the question is asked, did you use AI to help you write this proposal, and you did, whose work is that? Is it your work? So there's some moral ambiguity here too, that I don't know what to do with that. There used to be a very clear line on that. So do you get to claim something as your own if you put all the inputs in, and you're working collectively with AI to generate something together? Or do you claim that completely as your own? Or do you say, no, AI completely did this, and it's turning out better work than you could have done?
Right.
Is your boss going to be like, oh, well, you're fired? Or good work prompting AI to give you this excellent response?
I mean, and we're encouraged. I mean, thinking about the workforce, we're encouraged, at least at where I work, is to use artificial intelligence.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Because it makes us more productive.
It's all about the money.
It can make us more productive.
Efficiency, money. Yeah.
Well, for some places, yeah. For us, yes and no. Okay. more. I guess. Federal government is interesting in terms of it's lagging behind, but I think there are a lot of companies in the workforce, like private companies, profit driven, that are. Yes, that is like the only reason they're implementing AI is to drive profit.
So what happens when AI just really becomes better at everything than us?
It honestly probably is better at a lot of things than us already. I don't know. I mean, you think about like the risk of jobs being taken. I think
well, think about it from the church perspective. If Elon Musk is developing these robots. I can't remember what they're called, but it's basically like, if you watch Star Wars, C-3PO, which I think he's thinking around $20,000 for this incredible piece of machinery that like basically can do everything for you: clean your house, cook your meals, load your dishwasher, do yard chores or whatever. So it frees up all of this time. And what happens when that technology reaches a point where you can't distinguish between a human being and a robot, and it can access information instantaneously from all the world's libraries and all the world's research? It can stand up before a congregation and deliver a heartfelt, emotional sermon that is scripturally correct. What kind of world is that?
I don't know. I don't have the answer. My initial thought is I would hope that we're able to discern that I would be able to discern human versus robot AI, because there is a kind of, I don't know, a connection, like a human connection that AI has not yet been able to.
Okay, but it's
replicate.
coming.
It's coming.
We are going to reach a point where we're not going to be able to look at something and say, "Oh, that's not a human." Mm-hmm. I believe that day is coming. So, the question then becomes, what is reality? If all of your five senses say to you, if you're looking at me, and I seem as human as anybody else, but I'm actually a robot, but I can emote, I can do all the stuff that for you in your empirical world perceive me as a living human being, then we become very expendable and replaceable. If something that looks like us, talks like us, smells like us, walks like us, and does all of those things better, then what's to prevent you from forming an emotional, spiritual even connection with something that's not real?
Well, my question is, I mean, didn't Jesus deal with this issue talking about you'll recognize folks by their fruit? I mean, isn't the Pharisees were spiritual leaders, so they appeared to be empirically spiritual leaders, and Jesus came and said, no, like, here's what they're not doing correctly, and recognizing people by their fruit. So will we be able to discern that as Christians in this, super future world where I'm talking to you and you appear to be, human, but you're AI? Will that still ring true? Will Jesus' words still ring true that I can recognize you by your fruit and what you bear?
I mean, I guess it depends on my programming. And if I'm programmed to do everything perfectly,
But the problem I guess that's a flaw, because we can't program a perfect being because we are imperfect beings in ourselves.
And that gets into the crux of next week's podcast, which is about transhumanism, which is where we're headed with this. This is why, people listen to this podcast and are like, dude, what does that have to do with religion? Oh, it's got everything to do with religion and spirituality. And the unthinkable 10 years ago, we are now on the precipice of the unthinkable. We've got these really bizarre, strange concepts that we now have to untangle and deal with and ask these really tough questions. What does this mean for us? So it's fascinating, but it's also kind of scary at the same time. And I don't want to act like I'm an alarmist or anything, but there's a lot of red flags in my mind, and call me old-fashioned or set in my ways or whatever. I'm excited to see some of the stuff. I want to see 3PO in my house. I do. I think that'd be pretty cool. But I also see, the risk there that's involved with it. Yep. So how do you feel about it? Excited, scared?
I mean, I think that I've always been a techie. I've enjoyed technology. I mean, so it excites me. I think that this advancement is pretty incredible and remarkable. I do think that from a spiritual standpoint, we have to be cautious. But I'm also thinking, as generations, we've adapted to technology, and so I don't know. I'm not an expert on generations and their approaches to different types of technologies, but you can see the way that you approach technology, the way you approach technology and the way I approach technology are completely different.
Yeah.
And so I think, future generations, how are we going to adapt and change? And you can even see it a micro scale, AI slop, that's it. And I do it now, and it wasn't even a term 5 years ago. I see a sign or I see a slide and I'm like, AI made that. And so my generation, I think, is kind of oh, there goes the credibility.
Yep.
And so I feel like that will continue to evolve, and will continue to go, hey, AI is cool and can be useful, but also there is a thing as just AI garbage.
Yeah.
And maybe some of these things are just, hey, this is not.
Listen, I mean, from a prep standpoint, I would spend hours and hours trying to find pictures on the internet because I'm a very visual person. And It's funny because Parker's like, that was a strong AI because
We can tell we
I
can
know,
tell.
I know, but listen,
Yeah.
I am proud of that. I love that aspect that I can save so much time and
Right.
get a graphic to come up, and I absolutely know it looks AI. I don't care.
Yeah.
It gets my point across, and it saves me hours of going through, hundreds and hundreds of pictures. Or working trying to do it myself, and then it's not gonna look that great. So that piece of it, man, I think is fantastic, and I use that. And yeah, I know it looks AI, and I don't care. It's not related to the credibility of this research and the study that I've done to present, the information that I've got to present. So that piece of it, I think that's a great tool to use.
Yeah.
But pretty much everything outside of that, I'm very leery of it. So.
It's funny you say that because it's like there's so many use cases, and like that is one example of how you figured out how to use it. But again, we're just on the cusp. I mean, I don't think we've even began to dive. At least the people that I regularly talk to about this, I have not even begun to like really dive into what it's capable of.
Listen, I get into fights with AI, with trying to develop a picture. Like I end up getting enough because it won't produce what I want.
Yep.
And it's so easy to forget that you're dealing with a machine, and it's like, no, this is not what I'm looking for.
Yep.
Do better. And then sometimes it'll say like I was using one. This is of people that are listening that have never used this. This is probably going to be very funny to them. So I'm trying to get this picture of the refugees coming out of the northern kingdom. After Assyria has attacked. And so, the input that I said, develop a picture that has the northern kingdoms leaving a city in ruins, families fleeing for their lives. And so AI starts working on it, and then it comes back, it says this violates our standard for children. So I was like, wait, what? How does this violate your standard for children? They're just leaving a city. That's what I typed in.
Yeah. It's probably the fleeing destruction, violence.
Right.
It's probably,
yeah. And so I said, okay, well, we'll create a slide that doesn't violate your standards. And so it starts working again, and it spits back another thing. It says the image that we were generating violates our standards. Like, you are for a smart thing, you are so stupid.
I can just see you in there arguing with AI.
So yeah, it's a weird place to be right now.
Yep.
For me, it is anyway.
Well, it's just unknown. Like we don't know where this is going to go. And I think again, it's on us. Not to get political, but we the people, like this is something that maybe needs to become more of an important topic. When we think about laws and legislation of like, there's some things maybe AI shouldn't be able to do that it's able to do. And right now it's kind of the wild, wild west. And in some cases, because it has to be because you have other countries that are developing artificial intelligence. Right. And now it's kind of an AI race. Like it's like the moon race all over again. And who's going to come first to build the ultimate AI model. And you hope the person that built that has any sort of moral compass. And
there's a documentary this guy does that he addresses that very issue, and they're bypassing a lot of the safety standards because they're afraid that the other people aren't going to have the morality compass that they have. So they're all racing basically with the same thought in mind, which is to be the first to the finish line on it, and everybody's tossing away the safeguards to be the first one there because they think their idea of morality needs to be the one that wins out.
Well, you even have like Anthropic, who came out with Mythos and Fable, their newest AI models, which are supposed to just be unreal in terms of how good they are. And U.S. government got involved. I don't know if it's actually because of them ignoring the safeguards or them having a beef with Anthropic. But regardless, they came and said, you can't do this. Meanwhile, there's a Chinese AI company that has now released a model that is just as good, if not better, than Mythos and Fable 5. And so Anthropic was able to re-release because, again, it's like who's going to come to the table with the best AI model first?
Yeah. Weird stuff, man.
Yep.
All right, well, close us out, Brandon. We're out of time on this one. So
Yeah.
you're the expert in
Oh,
in artificial intelligence.
I'm definitely no expert, not even close. No, I think that it's important, again, for us to begin having this conversation. If you don't know what's going on in the world and in artificial intelligence, like do some research, learn about it, but think about, what are some of the ways that we can approach this from a spiritual aspect, and how could this impact us spiritually, and how can we continue to have these conversations? Because it's the time that we stop having these conversations that we are getting into a rough spot. So shout out to our sponsors, Ministry League. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the major streaming platforms. Also want to shout out our other podcast, Digging Deeper After Sunday, which is a recap of our Sunday mornings here at Central.
Yep. Until our next episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, be kind to one another, love one another, and remember, the creator of the universe loves you so much that he gave up his only son for you. Have a blessed day.